Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tips and Tricks Every Woodworker Should Know, the show where you send us your woodworking tips and we talk about, show, and explain them. In today's episode, we're going to cover how to get flat panel glue-ups with or without a jointer, how to cut a nice straight edge onto a crooked board without a jointer, the simple way to find the center of boards and circles, and how to get accurate inside cabinet measurements. Thanks to everyone that has submitted tips so far, and if you want to submit your own tip, check out all the information in the description. All right, Chris, let's hear that first tip.
This first tip actually wasn't submitted by anybody, but it's such a core skill within woodworking that we thought it'd be a good idea to include it. And it has to do with getting a nice flat panel glue up, whether you have a joiner or not. So whenever you're putting together a panel, typically one of the last things that you're going to do before actually clamping everything together is rip your boards. In a perfect world, when you do this, your blade would be at an exact 90-degree angle. But as you likely know, we don't live in a perfect world, and there's a decent chance that, well, it's not. Now the problem with this, and we'll show an extreme example, is that if your blade is off from 90, rather than making boards for a flat panel, you're almost making staves for a barrel. And the wider your panel is, or the more individual boards that are a part of it, the worse things are going to get. Now, if you have access to all of the main tools in a shop, a really common solution to this is to use a joiner and what's called the in and out method. Basically, you line your boards up in the orientation that you want them to be in when your panel's glued up. Then you write in and out on the mating edges. And by the way, you can ignore these labels. You only need to do it where the two edges meet. Anyway, then you'd take one pass on each edge with the face of your board positioned either in or out based on your labels. And this will create complementary angles so that you end up with a nice flat panel. Great, but what if you don't have a joiner? Well, thankfully, you can use an almost identical approach to achieve this with a table saw. But rather than writing in and out, we'll write up and down, and then rip our boards to the final width with our faces of our boards facing either up or down based on the labels. And as you can see, even with this really extreme example, with a blade that's way out of square, you end up with a pretty flat panel. It's a trick that can take what's normally a pretty big problem in woodworking and turn it into a piece of cake. Shaun?
All right, this next tip comes from Ivar Husa and has to do with getting a straight edge onto a board without using a jointer. And I know a jointer isn't a tool that everyone has in their shop, so hopefully this can help some people out. So the first step in just about any woodworking project is to get your material nice and straight, and using a jointer is usually the preferred tool for the job. But of course, just like with most things, there are ways to get a similar result using other tools that you probably already have in your shop, and more specifically, we're going to talk about how we can do this on the table saw. And before we get into it, if you like these techniques and want to give them a try, just remember to be safe and understand the concepts and your machines before trying anything new. Okay, this first method uses a long straight edge that can be attached to your table saw fence. Ivar explains that he uses an 8-foot long level, which is nice because you already know that it's straight, or at least it should be. Now, I don't own an 8-foot level, so to illustrate this technique, I'm using an 8-foot long piece of oak that I milled straight before filming. The idea is to clamp your long straight edge to your table saw fence, and what this does is extend the length of your fence, which allows us to run a crooked board through the saw. And as long as the board is oriented with the concave side against the long fence, it can maintain 2 points of contact through the entire cut. Whereas with just the normal length fence, the curve of the board would follow the fence and you wouldn't get a straight cut. So with the first edge cut straight, we can remove the long fence, then trim the other side of the board straight as usual. And as you can see, we now have two perfectly straight and parallel edges on our workpiece. One limitation of this setup is that the board you're cutting can't be too long where it potentially loses those 2 points of contact. So a similar technique we can employ for longer crooked boards, and this is one that I've used a lot over the years, is to not attach the long straight edge to the table saw fence, but instead run it alongside your workpiece when making the cut. As you can see, it's essentially the same concept. The only difference is that your workpiece can be as long as your straight edge, and since they're being pushed through the saw together, the 2 points of contact are maintained throughout the entire cut. This technique takes a bit of practice to keep your workpiece nice and snug against the straight edge to get a clean cut, and you could always get fancy and make a straight edge jig with hold downs and stuff like that, but I'd figured I'd show kind of the most simple version to illustrate the technique. Obviously, both of these techniques are great for crooked boards, but don't account for any bow or twist. So that said, when used in the right situation, these techniques can make getting jointer-like results without a jointer a piece of cake.
Already used a piece of cake.
Easy as pie?
Pie works. Okay, so this next one comes in from Brandon Mueller, and he's gonna show us how to use a speed square to find the center of a board. And this is a pretty common tip that a lot of people already know about. In fact, Brandon said so himself.
A lot of people already know this, but maybe not.
So because of that, I'm gonna show you a few other situations where these same concepts can be really useful. Hey, I just wanted to quickly mention that in addition to making woodworking tips videos, we also build a lot of woodworking projects. Honestly, that's mostly what we do on this channel. We recently built this coffee table and this lounge chair and this desk. All of these videos are pretty jam-packed with woodworking tips too. So if you're interested, go give them a look, and either way, let's get back to the tips. All right, so we'll start with what Brandon was showing us, and the idea was you want to find the center of a board without doing any of that pesky math stuff. So here we've got a board of unknown width, and we're using our speed square to mark a line perpendicular to one of our edges. Then it's just a matter of marking two diagonals using the square and making sure that the tips of those diagonals hit your perpendicular mark at the edge. Then wherever those two lines meet is the center of your board. From there, if you wanted to strike a line along the entire width of your board, just make another of these X's and draw a line that goes through the 2 points, and you've got a perfect halfway mark. Easy peasy. Another area where a very similar concept can be useful is finding the halfway point between two specific spots. For example, let's say we're building a cabinet like this with two dados for some vertical partitions, and we want to find the halfway point between them to add something. So here I'm getting the same board that we were using before, and I'm going to randomly cut two kerfs to represent my dados. And I don't know how far apart these are. Well, a really easy way to find the halfway point is to get a ruler and angle it so that the inside of your dados, or kerfs in this case, are hitting 2 points on your ruler that are easily divisible. So here I've got one at the 10-inch mark and another at the 20-inch mark. So if I make a mark at 15 inches on my ruler, that'll perfectly divide the area between my dados in half. And actually, there might be a situation where you want to divide something like this into, say, 5 equal parts. You could mark at 12, 14, 16, and 18, and you'll have 5 equal parts. Okay, one last trick, and that is that similar concepts can help you find the center of things that aren't square or rectangular. Say, for example, you've got a circular top and you need to find the center of the circle. What you could do is draw any two random lines that go across your circle like this. By the way, for all my geometry heads out there, I believe these are called chords. Anyway, then find the center of your line and draw a right angle line that goes towards the center of your circle. And wherever these perpendicular bisector lines meet is the center of the circle. All right, if you hate math, good news, that was the worst of it. And really what we were doing there was eliminating math. If you think about trying to find the center of an X versus trying to divide 9 and 17/30 seconds by 3, I think you'll agree that it's simple as a scone. Shaun?
All right, before we get into this next tip, let's go ahead and thank Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Both Chris and I have been using Squarespace to build and maintain our websites for years now, and honestly, it's one of the best choices we made when starting our businesses. At the time, I had no idea what I needed to do to build a website, but Squarespace makes it super easy to get up and running with plenty of professional-looking templates to choose from, as well as making things like purchasing domains really simple. Squarespace also has plenty of e-commerce tools to help you grow your business, things like inventory management, a simple and secure checkout process, and unlimited products allow us to easily manage online transactions and not get bogged down with mundane tasks so that we can devote more time to doing the things we enjoy, like learning woodworking tips. So if you're thinking about starting a website, or even if you already have one, go check out Squarespace to see if it might be a better option for you. Head over to squarespace.com/Foureyes for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, use the offer code Foureyes to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. All right, thanks Squarespace. Let's get to that last tip. All right, this next one comes in from Bill Parrish and is all about getting accurate inside dimension measurements. We've all run into the situation where we're trying to take a measurement for the inside of a cabinet or something like that, and we try to jam our tape measure into the corner and fold it up against one side and pretend like this is good enough. But let's be honest, this isn't very good, and there have to be better ways to do this. And luckily, there are better ways to do this. So I want to talk about a couple different techniques, then get into the one that Bill sent us. So this first one, which I would rank as mildly better, is that most tape measures have a dimension written on them that indicates the length of the tape measure body. This means that you can push the tape into the cabinet and making sure the hook end is up against one side and the tape measure body is up against the other side. Then we can just add that 2.5-inch dimension to whatever we're reading on the tape measure, and we have our inside dimension. Another technique, which I would put as medium better, is using a tape measure in conjunction with another measuring tool, and in my case, I'm using a 6-inch rule. By placing it against one side, then using my tape measure from the other side, I'm able to accurately measure to the end of the rule, then just add 6 inches to that measurement. Pretty simple and very effective. All right, now this last one, which is what Bill sent us, and I would consider full-blown spicy, is to get rid of the tape measure altogether, at least for a minute, and just get yourself a couple sticks. As long as they are longer than half the width of the cabinet opening, all you have to do is push them to either side, then clamp them together where they overlap in the middle. Then you can take this whole thing out of the cabinet and measure end to end to get a much more accurate measurement. Simple and effective. Manageable as a muffin. All right, thanks, Bill. Chris, what else do you have for us?
Nothing. I guess not even a tape ball. So I guess that's the end of the video. But if you want to check out more woodworking tips and tricks, we're going to link to our other videos in the description. And if you want to submit a tip, we'll have all the info there as well. So have a great day.